ain't see me, you Stevie. Wondering how I reach more evolutions than Eevee and make it look easy.
What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Ernie, the Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. All right, so today's video, we are going to be talking about Sentinels, number 2 and 3. And in this one, we are largely going to be focusing on this element of the story that I feel has a lot of legs, a lot of good things could come out of this. And we'll also talk a little bit more about the team itself towards the end of the video. But before we do all that, I humbly ask that if you haven't done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button and also make sure you tap that notification bell so you can become a part of my absolute squadron and never miss out on any of my videos. Also, if you enjoyed the video, hit that like button. It really helps the channel out and actually helps me find more viewers like yourself. The main talk about Sentinels right now is this element called grafting. Now, grafting is something that came up in the first issue. We saw it when it happened to Shellback very early on in the team's first mission. Shellback suddenly became riddled with all this circuitry running throughout his flesh. Now, that probably doesn't seem that out of the normal for a guy who's literally covered in Sentinel armor and robotics, but this was considered highly unusual. And not only was he covered in circuitry, but he was also speaking in binary code, really only able to communicate in binary code. This is something that was a big fear for the Sentinel program head, Lawrence Trask, the son of Bolivar Trask. The reason why this was such a big deal, because this new Sentinel program relies so heavily on the bonding of man and machine. And during the grafting process, this is the moment where the machine takes over the man. By the time we get to issue number 3, the Sentinels are on a mission in Madripoor, where we see the team hunting down what they believe is a mutant terrorist, only to learn it's actually just Fabian Cortez providing medical care to humans. For those unfamiliar with who Fabian Cortez is, he's a character that hails all the way back to the somewhat early to mid-90s of X-Men comics. He was the leader of the Acolytes and was the head cheerleader for Magneto. He was also responsible for using his mutant power to heal Magneto. Fabian also had the ability to inflict a power addiction on the people who he healed or boosted. He used this on Magneto, making him become reliant on his abilities, and this addiction also led to Magneto kind of slick turning back into the 1960s version of himself for a little bit. If you ever go back and read some of those comics from back when Chris Claremont and Fabian Nicieza were writing the X-Men series at that point, if you ever saw Magneto do or say anything that seemed kind of off, even for Magneto at that time, Fabian Cortez was likely the reason why. But Fabian has come a long way, and not only has he come a long way, but we've also learned that since the Krakoan era, and because of his death and resurrection, when he came back with a power boost himself. This is something that's not unusual. We actually have seen this with characters like Sync, which, to be fair, his is kind of weird considering the fact that originally he could actually sync his mutant X gene with the powers of both mutants and otherwise superhuman people alike. But during the Krakoan era, they made this big to-do about how his resurrection allowed him to sync with more than just mutants, but that's another story altogether. We also know the characters like Callisto gaining back her original mutant powers, but also gaining the ability to bend light and turn invisible, something that I don't think has ever been addressed since then. But point of the matter is that Fabian has gotten a power boost. He can now no longer just heal and boost the power of mutants, but he can also use his healing abilities on normal humans. And I think it's pretty safe to say that if he used his power boosting effects on someone who is a non-mutant but super powered, I'm pretty sure it would work just the same. And I actually wonder whether or not if Fabian Cortez were to use his power boosting element on just regular humans, would it not just make a regular human superhuman? But that's a story for another day, and honestly, I don't know if we will ever get an answer to that, because Fabian Cortez seemingly gets checked out by the time we get to the middle of this issue. Getting back to the Sentinels of it all, though, when the Sentinels approach Cortez, it's actually Lockstep, the field leader of the Sentinels, who recognizes that Fabian is not a threat. He's not threatening anyone. He's helping humans. These aren't mutants who he's healing. These are regular humans in Madripoor, and Fabian is healing them free of charge. Something that is very unusual for Fabian Cortez, considering the fact that he was very much one of the chief mutant anti-humans back during the 90s. As a matter of fact, he was probably more anti-human than even Magneto was back in the 60s. So the fact that he's actually helping humans free of charge for no other reason other than the fact that they needed help, that is a huge leap in, character depth for a guy like Fabian. And I love to see stuff like this. But in the midst of Lockstep deciding not to gun down Fabian right then and there, it's here where the team starts falling apart, because Lawrence Trask is of the belief that Fabian is going to raise up the Acolytes once again, something Fabian doesn't even seem to have an interest in right now at this precise moment. But I feel like what's going on with Lawrence is that he is either A, genuinely of the belief that Fabian is going to do these things while he's in Madripoor and inciting an international incident, or he is pretending that that is what he believes is going to happen and is really just more upset at the fact that Fabian is probably going to upset the natural order of healthcare in the world if humans start to discover that there are mutants who can heal them and not have to pay anybody any money. That's another story altogether. In the midst of all this, they end up running afoul of Magneto. Now, when they find Fabian, he's laying face down in the rain, and we don't really know if he's dead or alive or what's going on with him, but Magneto seems to be there as well and does not take kindly to the Sentinel's presence. Now, considering that we know what's going on with Magneto as of late, the fact that he is at this precise moment in Alaska and quite frail and not really having full control of his powers, this seems to be a Magneto that is way more in control of his faculties and not suffering from the same debilitating effects that Magneto is over in Jed MacKay's X-Men. Part of me wonders if this might be Joseph, the Magneto clone who popped up in the 90s, and it's difficult to say exactly what is going on with him right now. He kind of popped up in the Scarlet Witch series, and I haven't really seen him since then. Whatever the case is, this version of Magneto, if it is actually Magneto, runs roughshod on the Sentinels, as you would probably imagine a guy who is considered the Omega level master of magnetism would, over a bunch of people who are literally riddled with metal. It's not really a surprise, but it's here where one of them, Voivod, the chief loose cannon of the team, becomes grafted. And it's this moment that actually blows the door wide open for what grafting really is. Instead of being killed the way Shellback was when he became grafted, Voivod is actually taken into custody and returned to the base, where we learn that Lawrence Trask has a dark secret, something that's already been hinted at. And it's that Voivod isn't some binary bumbling idiot after becoming grafted. Lawrence implies that the binary babble that we hear from the Sentinels who become grafted is just a ruse. Voivod stops it almost immediately when Lawrence points out that he no longer needs to do it, and begins speaking plainly once they're alone. Voivod even mentions that if the world knew what the new Sentinels were made from, humanity would crucify him. Now, that's actually not anything out of the spectrum of possibility, considering that Lawrence Trask is not a normal human. He's a mutant, so, I mean, honestly, that's just Tuesday for mutants. This has techno-organic virus written all over it, and the government is no stranger to using the techno-organic virus either. The ONE once used a version of the virus to create sleeper agent Sentinels during the Matthew Rosenberg Uncanny X-Men. Even if it's not the transmode virus, another possibility is that this could very easily just be the Sentinel's code. You look at the lettering here in this situation, under normal circumstances, people who are infected with the transmode virus or the techno-organic virus tend to have yellow lettering boxes. These are just normal white lettering boxes, albeit with the typical techno or robotic style lettering boxes, but also with a pink text, something very reminiscent of what we've seen in the past with Sentinels. And while yes, this is a Sentinel, I'm thinking more in the OG sense. I feel like whatever's going on here, this could very easily be the return of Master Mold, like the programming of Master Mold working its way through these new cyborg Sentinels, or if not Master Mold's return, maybe the return of Mother Mold from the Krakoan era. But for right now, whatever it is, it ain't good for Lawrence Trask. And if it ain't good for Lawrence Trask, it for damn sure ain't good for the X-Men or mutant kind as a whole either. But all of that aside, Lawrence doesn't seem too terribly interested in Voivod's threats, which means Dr. Ellis might already know what's going on. I mean, granted, it doesn't seem like she has too terribly many scruples, considering in Sentinels number 2, we learned that those Bloodhound Sentinels we've been seeing hints and teases of and finally got to see fully unleashed in the most recent Uncanny X-Men number 7, it was revealed those are not robots. Those are no different than the Sentinels we see in this issue. Those are cyborg dogs built from using the bodies of actual wolves. If Dr. Ellis is perfectly okay with manipulating wolves in order to turn them into mutant killing machines, I don't think she's gonna care about the fact that humans were being used, with the techno-organic virus. If anything, she'll probably be more angry about the fact that it's getting out of hand, not so much the fact that it's happening. But if for whatever reason Dr. Ellis does not realize what's happening with this grafting situation, then she's not as bright as her doctorate would have us believe. Either way, Lawrence's Sentinel program is turning upside down and quick, and he might just have to unlock his powers again to get a handle on things. For those that are unfamiliar, Lawrence Trask is a precognitive mutant. He can see both the past, present, and future all at the same time, but it's a power that he can't control. So this is why he is wearing that control collar. When he doesn't have it on, he's typically a debilitated mess, completely incapable of keeping himself from going insane from all the things that he's seen. This explains why he's been so short-sighted as of late. He has no control over these abilities, so using that control collar is the only way that he doesn't look like a babbling buffoon. But he might have to risk losing his mind once again just to find out what's going wrong with these new Sentinels. Shellback and Voivod both have become grafted, leaving only Drumfire and Sawtooth as the remaining Sentinels who haven't gone rogue yet. Now, if you're wondering why I left out the team leader Lockstep, it is largely because he becomes grafted this issue as well. But it's a slow burn that it's happening. We learned this because thanks to Lockstep's ex-wife getting deep in debt with the Maja, Lockstep has to go put his foot down, and we quickly see he's well on his way. But what happens with these grafted Sentinels if left unchecked? Considering the fact that Shellback was killed off immediately once he became grafted, and this was labeled as something that is a mandate for all Sentinels who become grafted, but Voivod was left alive and we see he has all his faculties, it's very obvious that the machine has completely taken over the man at this point, but it seems like the machine side is incredibly lucid. So it makes you wonder, when they become grafted, do these Sentinels become phalanx full stop, ready to assimilate the world at a moment's notice, or do they become something better? All in all, I really like the rogue element that's going on in all this. I know a lot of people don't like the fact that this is a book that's effectively about a bunch of cops, but at the end of the day, the X-Men are cops. Let's just be honest with ourselves. The X-Men are cops, but for mutants. And if you like the Avengers,
I'm afraid I've got some bad news.
They're cops too. Daredevil, cop. Spider-Man, spider cop. Batman, cop. All superheroes are cops. You get that out of your head. That's a dumb mindset to have about superheroes. But I get why people don't like the idea of the Sentinels, but I'm gonna tell you right now, this book has actually been hit. And to go back to some things that happened in issue number 2, I don't really care about the Sebastian Shaw of it, but yeah, I like the idea of the storytelling that's going on with these characters, because we have seen that Drumfire, the new addition to the team, at least in terms of being the last member added, she has been going through her own personal hell because she sees Onslaught everywhere. From the moment she sets foot into the issue with number 1, she's seen Onslaught off and on in issue 2, and she's definitely still seeing him here in issue 3. At one point, when having a back and forth with Dr. Ellis, we literally see her looking at Ellis, but Ellis is not sitting there. It's Onslaught. And I think that is something that's bigger than a lot of people might want to give it credit for. I mean, yeah, it's hallucinations, but we can't forget what Onslaught is. Onslaught is basically an idea disguised as a boogeyman. And we already saw how during the Krakoan era, Onslaught was brought back temporarily because he was infecting the minds of mutants as this new boogeyman style character. They didn't know him as Onslaught right away, but as the story progressed in Way of X, it became very obvious it was Onslaught before it was all said and done. So I wonder if, with Onslaught being in the wind after the Krakoan era, I wonder if Drumfire just hallucinating him via her PTSD, if that is not going to be a way to actually take what is otherwise a normal, regular, degular hallucination and turn it into Onslaught proper, which is basically the stuff of nightmares for pretty much anyone in the Marvel Comics universe. But for Drumfire, it is literally hell on earth, considering that Onslaught was the very thing that traumatized her in the first place.